ultimatums. What's the difference, and which one should you be using? You be setting boundaries or giving ultimatums? So setting boundaries is considered an essential, um, some might just say important, but I think it's an essential positive self-care exercise. But some people perceive boundaries um, as ultimatums or demands with negative consequences attached. But boundaries and ultimatums are different, and it's better to set boundaries than to give ultimatums for sure. So I recall finally getting up the courage to set a few boundaries with my husband. Our marriage was struggling at the time, and my husband was drinking a fair amount. And when he would do that, he would often speak to me in ways I didn't like, that I felt, that I interpreted as uh, demeaning and disrespectful. Oh, Elu's going to join me for the video. Um, and so, with some support, basically, the behavior was unacceptable to me. I didn't want to be treated that way. And with some help from a coach who asked me, if I cared enough about myself to set a boundary, or was I just going to let my husband treat me this way? Um, so I got some support from a coach, and I decided to speak up. And I said to him, I'm not okay with you speaking in a manner that I interpret as demeaning, disrespectful, etc. And I'm unwilling to be treated that way. Um, when you drink too much and you begin speaking to me that way, I'm not willing to be spoken to that way or treated that way. So if I perceive you speaking to me and treating me that way again, drunk or sober, I'm going to leave. Like, I'm going to leave the marriage. And my husband's reaction was understandably negative. He said, so either I behave how you want me to behave and speak to you the way you want me to speak to you, or else, right? Or else you leave. You're giving me an ultimatum. And I tried to explain the difference to him, not super successfully at the time, but ultimately he kind of understood, and he began drinking less and treating me better and not speaking to me that way. And while my willingness to set a boundary ultimately, I think, saved my marriage, the biggest win really was how I felt about myself afterwards. I had loved myself enough to put a boundary around how I allowed other people to treat me. And that was huge. And I've never again been afraid to set a boundary for that reason. It was just such a big deal. And I told him that. I said, I've loved myself too much to be treated this way. And I tried to make that really clear, that it was about me, how I felt about myself, that I had to love myself enough to set this boundary. So, as you probably realize by now, knowing the difference between boundaries and ultimatums is crucial, especially in relationships. So, let's explore the distinction between the two, shall we? So, boundaries are defined as personal limits you set to protect your emotional, mental, and physical well being. They define what you're comfortable with and what you are not comfortable with. Um, and that allows you to maintain a sense of self and autonomy in your relationships. Okay, boundaries communicate to others your needs and values, and that enables other people to understand how to interact with you respectfully and in a way that you like. Boundaries can be flexible and evolve depending on a situation or a relationship. So as an example, you might set a boundary like, I need time to be alone to recharge after a day, so I'm not going to be available for phone calls after 8 p.m. So that's something you might tell your employees or your boss. Maybe you tell a friend, I'm not comfortable discussing certain topics. I'd like to steer clear of them during our conversations. Or in my case, I'm not comfortable with you being, you speaking to me that way. And so if you do, I'm going to leave, right? So people tend to, an ultimatum though is a demand. It's a demand that involves a situation where one person has to choose between two options, um, often with a consequence attached if the demand isn't met. So it's more of a demand than a request. Frequently, ultimatums are perceived as a form of pressure or control or a last resort to create a desired change in someone or something. So people tend to use ultimatums when they feel their boundaries are not being respected. They imply that if the other party doesn't comply with the boundary, then there'll be a significant consequence or the end of a relationship. So in my case, I guess you could say there was an ultimatum because I said I would leave, but the boundary was don't treat me that way. Don't treat me that way, or else I'll be forced to have an ultimatum, right? So maybe to a certain extent, my husband was right, and there was an ultimatum. Anyway, an example of an ultimatum might be you have to decide by the end of the week if you want to move in together or I'll look for another place. If you don't show up for work on time, I'll fire you, right? So if you look carefully at boundaries and ultimatums, you'll discover some key differences, okay? First, there's a difference in intent, in the intention behind it. Boundaries are established with the intention of promoting self-care and effective communication. So that was the case really with mine was, that's why I say it wasn't an ultimatum, it was a boundary because it was about self-care, loving myself enough to take care of myself and not let people treat me that way, right? It's also about effective communication. So ultimatums are intended to convey a desire to control, to ensure an end result, or to threaten consequences. So second, there's a difference in intention. So second, there's a difference in flexibility, okay? So boundaries can be negotiable and open to discussion, and sometimes they do change. Ultimatums tend to be rigid and leave little room for compromise. And then third, there's a difference in outcome. Boundaries promote communication and understanding and respect and a desire for a healthier relationship with yourself and with others. My example with my husband was that, right? I wanted to communicate what I needed and wanted so that we could have a healthier relationship. Ultimatums can create conflict and anger and fear, potentially damaging relationships. So when my husband saw this as an ultimatum, yeah, that wasn't so good for us. But once we got past that part and he could see that this was about me taking care of myself and how I wanted to be treated or how I felt I deserved to be treated, it was a different story. Anyway, here are some tips for setting boundaries. Okay, so first, know your needs and your values. Reflect on what's really important to you and what makes you feel comfortable or uncomfortable. Understanding your personal values helps clarify the boundaries you need to set. Okay. Number two is to be clear and specific. When you communicate your boundaries, be as clear and specific as possible. Instead of a vague statement, articulate what behaviors are acceptable and which ones aren't. Okay. For example, you can say, I need an hour of quiet time after work instead of I need some space. So be very, very clear. Number three is to use I statements. So I was very careful to say, that this was about me, that to use I statements, because if you use you statements, you're pointing the finger and you're blaming rather than taking responsibility. I just took responsibility for how I wanted to be treated. Okay. So frame your boundaries with I statements to express your feelings without sounding accusatory. So you could say, I feel stressed when I receive work emails after hours, so I won't check my email after 6 p.m. Never say, you make me feel stressed, or you expect me to check my email after work hours. That's placing blame on others. Okay, so take responsibility for how you feel and what you want by sticking to a first person statement. Four is practice assertiveness. Be confident and assertive when you communicate your boundaries. Practice saying your boundaries out loud and until you feel comfortable delivering that message. And remember, it's okay to stand up for yourself. Number five is to stay consistent. Consistency is key to maintaining boundaries. Suppose you waver or allow someone to cross the boundary, right, without taking the action that you said you would take. In that case, it can confuse the other person about your limits or how serious you are about that boundary. So you really need to stick to your guns and reinforce their importance. Number 6 is to anticipate resistance. People are going to be resistant to your boundaries. They just are. So be prepared for that potential pushback, especially if the people in your life are used to crossing your boundaries or treating you in certain ways you don't like, right? So stay calm and just reiterate your need firmly, even in the face of resistance. Uh, yeah, and don't try to control or threaten in order, threaten consequences. Just, you know, because then the other person is going to understandably perceive your request as ultimatums. Okay, so just stick to your boundaries. Be mindful of timing. Choose the right time to discuss boundaries. Ideally, when you and the other person are calm and you can have an open conversation. And avoid bringing up boundaries during those heated moments of conflict. I did not tell my husband any of this stuff while I was angry and while he had been drinking and was upset and all of that. I waited. Okay. Um, and actually, I waited. Well, we talked about some of it in a therapy session, but I did tell him later, but when we were both calm. Okay, learn to say no is number 8, the 8th tip. Practice saying no without guilt. Remember, you're not obligated to please everyone. Boundaries are about pleasing yourself in some way. Saying no can actually be the healthiest choice for you and the other person. Number 9 is to respect other people's boundaries. If you want your boundaries respected, it's a two-way street. You need to respect theirs. So be prepared for that, to respect their boundaries as other people establish them. It's about mutual respect, right? And number 10, the 10th tip is to seek support if you need it. If setting boundaries feels challenging, consider getting support from a therapist or a coach or a trusted friend. They can help you navigate boundary setting and provide some encouragement for you. Also, set your boundaries in a safe space. So, like I said, you could do it during a therapy appointment or a coaching session. The coach or the therapist can act as a buffer and offer an objective perspective. And then, setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable. I know it from my own experience. It feels uncomfortable at first. So be patient with yourself as you learn this new skill if it is new to you. And when you feel afraid to assert yourself and ask for what you need, reaffirm that it's a necessary part of your well-being. Okay? It adds to your well-being. It is self-care. So you're taking care of yourself. You're loving yourself enough to set these boundaries, right? And then set your intention. I think the intention part is super important. Set your intention on setting clear boundaries and avoiding ultimatums. Setting boundaries is, again, about self-care and building healthier connections and relationships. It may take you some time and practice, but the positive impact of learning to set them is going to become evident in your relationships and in your overall 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 emotional and mental well-being. Like I said, the biggest win for me was how I felt afterwards, just for standing up for myself and loving myself enough to set the boundary. So I'd love to know, do you set boundaries or give ultimatums? And how's that working for you? Okay, or do you need to learn how to set some boundaries? Use the tips that I just provided. If you're new to me, I'm Nina Amir, the Inspiration to Creation Coach. I am a transformational coach. I am a certified high performance coach. I am an author and an author coach, lots of different types of coaches. And I love helping people get from where they are to where they want to go. I love helping them combine their inspiration and their passion so they get, or their purpose and their passion so they get inspired to take the action that will help them create what really matters to them. So if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like you need to set some boundaries and you don't know how, if you're feeling like you're not loving yourself enough, if you're feeling like you're not taking the steps you need to take in order to create what you really desire, then it's time to step into being the person who can do that, being the person who can take those steps, being the person who can set the boundaries, being the person who loves themselves. So if that's of interest to you, click on the link above. It offers 3 different ways to work with me. One is one-on-one certified high performance coaching. The other one is one-on-one transformational coaching. And the other one is group coaching in my Inspired Creator community, which is not always open. But if it's not open right now, get on the waiting list so that you can be the first one in the door, because that is truly a transformational program. So if transformation is what you're looking for, that's what I'd love to help you achieve. So click on the 3 ways, figure out which one is best for you. If you're confused, I'm going to put another link up there that is for a quick 15-minute conversation with me. So let's have a little talk and decide what's the best way for you to move forward and work with me and see whether we're a good fit to even do that together. Okay? So that's it for today. Until I talk to you next time, set some boundaries and go out there and achieve more inspired results.